Serious, what is the story of your worst date? From the get-go, talking to her was honestly like talking to a flipping brick wall. If I asked her a question, her reply was typically one word or at most a single sentence. And no questions in return or any effort to keep the conversation going. At one point, she got up to go to the toilet, and the older woman who was sitting at the table next to us leaned over and whispered to me, "I have to say, I really admire your patience. She is a nightmare." I went out one night with some of my girlfriends. I was the young, naive girl in our group. We went to this bar that is on a lake and had a great time drinking margaritas. I met a guy. We danced, laughed. Really clicked. My girlfriends were ready to go. I didn't want to. He was making promises that he could get me home, but the DD in our group put her foot down and said we had to go. We exchanged numbers and made promises to talk soon, and the DD took us girls home. The next day, I get a text from him. I'm so excited because he had to be interested if he texts the next day, right? We make plans for dinner and he offers to pick me up. Him, so, pick you up at the same address. Me, same address. What are you talking about? Him, the house I dropped you off at. Me, you didn't drop me off. Him, shut up. We had sex in your driveway. Me, no, we did not. Him, yes, we did. Me, I'm really confused. And I think you are too. But I'm not the girl you went home with last night. So the date died before it ever got started. Grateful for the DD though. She was a lifesaver. Went out with a guy who was a medic in the Navy. He looked nothing like his pictures, but I carried on out of politeness. Over the course of the next 3 hours he bragged about all of the people he knew who had successfully killed themselves. Bragged about how many times he had encouraged suicidal people to kill themselves and how he had often self-harmed with them. To make things worse, he worked in the hospital and was telling me how he would give depressed patients sharp objects and tell them that it was less paperwork for him to do if they killed themselves. He also didn't have a clue about most medical conditions and would just send people away telling them they are fine. He finished off by telling me about his really messed up family and how his two 13 to 15-year-old brothers had been arrested for stealing and burning cars. And his sister kept trying to stab all the family members. Suffice to say, I made a swift exit and never went on Tinder again. Met online back in 2003. Agreed to meet at a diner we both knew. I got there first. She arrived, hit the gas instead of the brake, drove into the curb, then hit a light pole which fell over and landed on a parked van. No one got hurt, but she was pretty embarrassed. Never heard back from her. We were both broke, so we went walking around this cute, teeny tiny country town near us, and then got McDonald's to eat in the car so we could chat some more. He almost immediately starts pressuring me for sex because he bought me a cheeseburger, so I owe him, he says. He starts getting pushy, and I say, okay, but let's go get some condoms from this gas station that's on the other of town. I drove for this date, so I take us to the gas station, and tell him to go get the condoms while I wait. I wait for him to get in the door and go a bit farther into the store before I drive off, leaving him stranded in this tiny gas station in the days before cell phones got popular, in a tiny country town with no bus service, no ride shares, and everything shuts down by 6 p.m. I know from mutual friends he made it home, but they already knew why he'd been ditched at the gas station, so no one cared about his scrappy whining about it. I haven't had many dates, but the last one I went on asked me if I could still have children. Yes, I can still have children. Am I going to have any more children? No. But you still can though, right? Left early and blocked his number. Haven't had many dates, but the worst/funniest was from Tinder, shock. The plan was to start at my house as a double date, then if it went well split up and go out. It never got to the last part because he crapped in my toilet, blocked it with toilet roll, got embarrassed when my friend went in, and left. Oh, and he forgot his jacket in the rush, so got one of his friends to come and get it the next day. He stuck his fingers in my dessert, licked his fingers and did it again. I ordered a lemon meringue pie and offered him to some. He said no, only to then proceed to say actually that looks good and sticks his fingers in for a taste. Yuck. I had been seeing this guy for a few months, but he kept me on the down low / didn't want to commit. Finally took me out to dinner in public. We sat at the bar. A little after we ordered, his two friends got to the bar and he immediately got up before they spotted us. He went over to them and sat and ate dinner with them and texted me not to come over. So I sat alone for most of the night until his friends left. So many stories, but one of the worst. Sorry it's a bit long. I matched with this guy on Tinder, and he offered to take me out to dinner. I thought that sounded nice, so later that night he picked me up. We were driving and he asked me where I wanted to go. I told him I was fine with anything. He said, okay then, and pulled into Subway. He then told me that he wasn't hungry, but that I should eat. So he stood outside of the Subway and watched while I went in and got myself food. At this point I was already mentally done, but I wanted to see how much worse it would get. Spoiler, it got so much worse. So I'm sitting in the car with the stupid flipping sub on my lap, and he decided that it was a great idea to drive around, specifically through a dark, isolated ravine that was nearby. He drove for about 10 minutes into the ravine, parked the car next to an abandoned tennis court and said, okay, you can eat now. I was just thinking, I really don't want to die here, so I choked down the soggy sub while he stared at me. The second I was done, he pulled the car out and drove me back home. I was so grateful to make it home in one piece that it took me several days to process how flipped up the entire date was. The cherry on top, at 2 a.m. that night, he came back to my house uninvited, carrying a bag full of stale donuts, and asked me if I wanted to have sex, but it had to be without a condom since he didn't have any. He took off his pants. After a first date of dinner and a movie, he asked if I'd like to have some fun. I said no. He apologized for overstepping himself. I told him, hey, I totally understand and it's okay. Now the confusing part. He took my word okay as consent for I totally want to do sex now. So he immediately and quickly took off his pants. Such awkwardness when I explained it was still a no. I had an old college friend come to visit me and stay for a weekend. Knew her in college. She was amazingly intelligent and fascinating, but we were both spoken for at the time. Years later I got Facebook and she was one of the first people to find me. Both of us were single. She asked if I wanted to date her. I said hell yes. I was thrilled at the prospect. The short version. The weekend was spent listening to her narcissistic bullcrap. She told me jokes that are as old as the internet, reworded to sound like personal life anecdotes. She told me all this insane edgelord crap she used to or still does, like taunting police, back in 2009, or sneaking Cuban products back to America when the embargo was still in place. She tried to start a fight with a bouncer when we went to a bar and she forgot her ID back at my house, a block away. We visited some of my best friends, and the moment we parted she talked crap about them non-stop. My brother came by since I texted him I was out and hung out. She talked to him for quite a while. He left, then she spent the rest of the night talking about how attractive he was. At this point I was just counting the hours until she left. I was no longer interested in her. She finally left, and I get a text that night. You failed all my tests. You laughed at my jokes that weren't really jokes, you didn't defend me against the bouncer, and you aren't interested in my passion, fighting bouncers and cops, and you sat there and took it while I talked about your brother. Also, I don't find you physically attractive. I didn't reply. I just cut my losses and fell asleep. Several months later at 4 a.m. I get another text from her. Same text as I just wrote, only this was out of nowhere, and the injury following insult. I gave her absolute hell for it, and blocked her on Facebook. She then made duplicate Facebook accounts, and threatened me on those too. She gave up eventually, but I dodged a flipping bullet. So it's not my date, because my bad dates are just boringly regular stuff, but working in bars and restaurants, I've been able to witness some absolute doozies. And boy does this one take the cake. So, it's a fairly quiet night and it's pretty early, and I have a reservation for 6 p.m. for 2 people. Young guy shows up for that reservation about 10 minutes early, tells me he's very nervous, as he's on a first date, and hasn't been on many of them, all that kind of jazz, kinda sweet really. Anyways, I seat him, and the girl arrives, like, 30 minutes late. She then proceeds to get extremely drunk. About halfway through the meal, though, she answers her phone, takes the call, and starts talking about her date, in front of her date, saying stuff like he's not really my type, I don't exactly like him but I figured I had nothing else planned tonight so why not. Young man looks super discouraged, pays his bill, and leaves. He's a nice lad, I've seen him a few times at the bar I work at now. Went out with guy from work who I didn't know much about. He turned out to be a weenie in many ways and was drunk when I showed up. Lowlight of the night was when he started douchily heckling the small cover band that was playing in the bar. The guy on the mic said, "I'll give you $10 out of my own pocket if you can tell me this girl's name," and you guessed it, he literally blanked on my name in front of a room full of people. Edit, forgot the kicker. The next day he texted me saying, "You can try again," as if I was the one who blew it. I got a girl's number and went to the dentist a few days later. For wisdom teeth and a lot of drugs later, I apparently showed the dentist her number as my emergency pickup. I have no memory of these events, but apparently she picked me up, took me to the pharmacy for my medication, and dropped me off at my apartment, where I passed out. That was our first and only date. Apparently I didn't make a good impression. Can't blame her for that. I have no idea why the dentist office asked drugged up me for a pickup number. I assume they couldn't reach my primary help number, but I never asked. Like and subscribe for more videos.